Welcome in the arena. My name's Allyson Klein. We are coming to you as an advance episode for the AI Infra Summit, and it's my favorite conference of the year. I love this conference. I think that we get such great insights into the real world of AI deployments, and today is no different. We've got a TechArena veteran with us, Arun Nandi. He's the Chief Data and AI Officer at Carrier, back again to share his insights with our community. Welcome, Arun. How are you doing?
Thanks, Allison. Yes, we have made this a habit. So
Mhm.
great to be here, back here, third year in a row. Again, very similar to you. I'm also a big fan of the AI Infra Summit and really look forward to this event on the calendar every September. So pleasure to be here and really looking forward to the event.
So, Arun, you have a fantastic role at Carrier. Can you just give the audience who haven't listened to our previous episodes a bit of background on your career arc and the role you're playing at the company?
Yeah, great. So I lead the charter for all things data and AI. It's a great place to be in the world of AI. Very exciting mandate here, and have had the opportunity to grow this capability from its infancy several years ago to where it is today in all the great developments that are taking shape. Prior to this, I had an opportunity to help shape the data and AI strategy at Unilever. So across these two massive organizations, it is all about ensuring you have a strong data strategy, an ability to drive a governed and scalable AI ecosystem, and of course, bringing the talent along the journey as well. As it is extremely competitive, so it's been a great ride so far in shaping organizational's ability to drive impact and value from the work that we do, and situating the work as really a profit center orientation, which I've done across the organizations that I've had the pleasure to work with, and really driving commercial P&L impact from AI as an enabler.
You know, I was thinking back to our previous episodes in my prep this morning. And one of the things that I was thinking about is that we talked a lot about moving from pilots to deployments. And this year's interview is going to be so different. At AI Infra this year, you're talking about not just using AI for productivity gains, but really looking at it as a growth driver for the business. When you think about that productivity layer, I think a lot of companies may get stuck there. What are the underlying reasons that you're seeing, and how does that connect to the next step around growth?
Yeah, so I'd say that to start with, productivity was one of the low hanging fruits of what AI had an opportunity to influence and drive a case for change. But that
Mhm.
conversation's obviously evolved quite significantly from the early days of the LLMs and the other technologies within AI to where it is now. In 2025 and 26, really, the conversations evolved into how can this drive ultimately product and service differentiation, and how can you drive new businesses an ability to reimagine processes that are currently run in massive organizations as well, and how do you think through this entire value stream as something that you reimagine in the world of AI. So what we are talking about is margin expansion, the ability to drive incremental revenue, and ultimately through our product engineering, how do we support the ability to drive better products which create a moat for us in the ecosystem against our competitor set that we work with, and ultimately to support the customers that we serve, the communities that we serve. So it has really elevated the case for change from being one which was looking at productivity alone to now really looking through the entire spectrum of what AI can influence. And I think that is in no part influenced by this evolution that we've seen that you spoke about, Allison, about how we were driving a lot of POCs in the past. All organizations had an opportunity to drive a number of POCs, but really now POCs has become a bit of a a misnomer for what you want to drive at a certain degree of scale but hasn't yet reached that scale. So we've now taken a step back and said, do we want to continue to do a lot of these POCs as we have in the past, or do we want to change the playbook and approach it very differently? And this is where the success that we've got has been through this value stream transformation that I spoke about. So we've had an opportunity to think about roles within the organization which influence change ultimately through ownership of the outcomes within those value streams. And the people that are functionally responsible for those value streams are ultimately the owners for how you think through the evolution of the role that AI has to play there. So it is a combination of both the technologist in the room as well as the functionalist in the room. And the magic happens when those two come together and
Yeah.
really drive the power of how this can drive the impact.
I think that where my mind goes is agentic models and how agentic AI can really transform how folks work and what they can deliver. I saw a report that a company, I think it was IKEA, took out a number of their customer service reps and turned them and retrained them into designers. So they tapped a completely new capability to meet customers. So this is very much on theme with what you're talking about around when you think about partnering with line of business. And you think about, the existing business lines at Carrier, for example, how do you work on identifying how technology is going to integrate so that you can open up that growth path?
Yeah, a couple of different ways in which we brought this to life. One, through the creation of a council which is essentially a community of practice for us to really bring together a lot of the functional leaders, the business units along this journey, because through this lens of the governance and the steering that we want to drive for these massive initiatives, it is a lot about prioritization, where we're putting our capital and our people against the big ticket items, the biggest ability to move the needle. Second, it's about the ability to drive the adoption and change that we spoke about as well. So something that we have done with this council is brought to life this role of an AI catalyst. And the AI catalyst is somebody that has really helped shape this journey for us as we've thought through this. And another chapter in this playbook that we're rewriting is about how we go to market as well, right? In this world over the past 6 months, I'd say, where we've really seen an inflection of the capabilities of the AI models that are currently at large. The dot releases that have taken shape February onwards, that has really brought a lot of power to vibe coded apps and a lot of the art of the possible. We're really reshaping how we go to market as an internal data and AI team that supports both our external customers as well as our internal customers. And we no longer go into any of those discussions with slides like we used to. We go in with prototypes. And the reason for that is the ability for us to convert ideas into prototypes has become increasingly easy. And if you go back to the previous generation archetype of how we've gone through ideation all the way to delivery, you typically had an entire process which we have now crashed. We've said we're no longer gonna adhere to that process, because if you go to stakeholders today, either external customers, internal ones as well, and talk about an 8 to 10 week timeline for the delivery of an initiative, guess what? You have an executive who's going to vibe code an application that's going to solve their problem tomorrow, and they may be building the application, but they may not have the right architecture, they may not have the right security guardrails, they may not have the ability to scale that. So you are creating more complexity and incurring additional tech debt. So the ability for data and AI teams to really move with speed has to be an imperative, and this is something that we have to embody as well. Something that I've loved to do just as a technologist at heart, and having the opportunity to vibe code a number of applications, more so than I've probably done in the past 10 years, I have in the last 10 weeks.
Hmm.
So it has really given us this opportunity to progress with speed, where the only limitation now is our ability to think through these ideas, not as much the execution and the delivery of these ideas anymore.
Now, when I think about large organizations, I think that, and I've worked in a bunch. When you think about change and you think about changing of systems and processes, sometimes change is slow. And you just said something so important that the executive is going to vibe code it, maybe not with the right architecture if you don't respond with speed in the case of AI. How have you addressed this at Carrier to remove some of the corporate bottlenecks to allow your team to move with nimbleness in deployment?
Yeah, the role of a centralized team is no longer the shepherds and the people that own the technology, but the role of a central team is really to democratize that technology, and that's
Mhm.
something that we've really embraced. And part of that is ensuring that we have the ability to provide people with the right tools for their jobs, whether it is a productivity agent that you're providing a license and access to a certain job or a certain team, whether it's a coding assistant and a developer productivity tool that you're providing access to a different team. So it is really going to come down to the ability to meet the requirements with the variety of different tools that we have, and really make sure that we are pushing those down for people to realize the abilities of what ideas they have to not just improve their own personal productivity, but their teams and their departmental productivity are ultimately the value streams there as well. So that's one part of the job, which is really to help push down the technology, enable it through the right trainings, through the right change management and adoption. And I think we've done that extremely well. We've had a couple of programs of driving citizen literacy around AI that have got a lot of attention. Some of our vendors have featured them as success stories in their conferences as well. So that's been something that has come to life exceedingly well. Um, but equally, on the other side of the spectrum, there is going to be a core set of what I would describe as pro code applications, which is going to come down to the purview of a centralized team or a deep tech team that is going to be required to solve not the real personal productivity challenges, but the massive, hairy enterprise transformation objectives. So this really takes off from this paradigm of how you have to have shared ownership.
Mhm.
Maybe the ownership model that organizations will lean into, similar to what we have, could be that no code development can be something that you can enable with citizen teams, but pro code development is something that you perhaps want to ensure that you have the ability to drive that scale with a central team. So it is really playing both sides of that fence, and having the charter around both, for me here as a chief data and AI officer at Carrier, has given me the opportunity to lift all boats by doing that, and that has seen a lot of success within our ecosystem.
Now, one thing that you said is that you've got the AI team working hand in hand with the data team, and data is so important with the core capabilities that you're delivering. Tell me about how that means that you've got to think about your data in different ways. Are there architectural shifts in the way you're managing and provisioning data that help you unlock capabilities faster?
Yeah, so a data team and the ability to bring the data to life and use that as an accelerator for all of your AI outcomes is going to be a critical, either a bottleneck or an enabler, and that depends on how much of the investment and the prioritization is going towards those, not just the data governance and the data platforms, but also the data products ecosystem and how those are coming to life with the engineering teams. And I think a way that has manifested in reality is the ability for us to harness the data in a manner which continues to drive the evolution of that. So from the raw data all the way to enriched and semantically rich data is something that we've got to drive across our, not just our critical data sets, but also ultimately all our data sets. And that includes not just structured data, which enterprises have become extremely proficient at dealing with, but unstructured data and the ability to harness that as well. You alluded to customer service. That's a great example of where you can harness troves of data that you might have. Another example is product data that we collect. So telemetry data of products, where we have over 5 terabytes of data that we collect each day. And that requires just a reimagination of the architectural approach of how you think through the differences and the utility of OLAP databases versus OLTP databases, how you think through essentially the ability to connect real-time systems of agents into systems of record and systems of data from the previous generation archetype of potentially running those through batch jobs to more be a continuous cycle of how you develop these. So it has really both challenged the architecture, because architectures and the decisions around architecture that we're taking are getting challenged every 3 months, every 6 months or so, and we've had to reimagine those. But that is a step in the right direction, because it is thinking about assets that we have not had in the past, and really it is making a positive dent in the direction that we're progressing at, where we are thinking through how this is a future fit data foundation that has the right architectural elements in play to get the ball rolling into those enterprise scale use cases that we're enabling. And I think a third mention I would make is that in this rapidly evolving architectural transformation, the protocols will change, the standards will evolve, right? We're talking about MCP last year, we're talking about A2A this year, so those will change. But I think the core fundamental way in which we bring those to life has not changed, which is we start with the problem statement, we understand what data elements are required, and then we build for outcomes where we think of sustainable, efficient, governed, and scalable products that we want to build that have an opportunity to grow.
Now, alongside everything that you just talked about, we're unleashing agents similar to how you unleash human resources. So, how do you think about governance of all these agents and the core capabilities that you're delivering? And how has that changed your approach when you think about IT governance as a whole?
Yeah. AI governance specifically has been a bit of a passion project of mine for the past several years. It was quite nascent when I was running with it in 2023, but obviously has evolved to become quite mature in 2026. So it is something of that I've been very passionate about, and thinking through how we are assessing the ability for us to think of the governance challenges today, but also anticipating the challenges of the future. I'm very proud of the work that we've done in this space, and we have what I would describe as an entirely agentic approach to our governance strategy as well. So this is a little bit of us sort of ensuring that we have the ability to demonstrate the use of AI within the services we provide as well. So we have an AI review council, which essentially has an agentic orchestrator. And what this orchestrator does is it invokes 8 different agents, which each deal with a certain governance, compliance, or risk dimension. So this could be anything from data privacy to ethics to compliance. So there are these a variety of different agents that we invoke through the orchestrators, and we have an ability to define not just the cadence and the frequency for how we assess risk over time, because it is a continuous monitoring capability, but also the ability to track some of those outcomes as well that are emanating from those technologies. And that has now become something which started off as a governance, risk, and compliance oriented function, but is now serving multiple functions, which include the ability for us to think through the architectural approach that we spoke about, the commercials as well, which is obviously becoming a big topic of discussion with token maxing. So there are multiple additional dimensions that this team has really started to own as outcomes over this past time as we've evolved the scope and the nature of them.
Now, Arun, you've talked about how you have built your organization to work with lines of business, and I think that that makes a lot of sense to me. But one of the things that you put on the table is that you're a growth driver for the company. How are the C-suite conversations going, and how are C-suite leaders and the board of directors thinking about this from a perspective of how they're overseeing the company as a whole?
Yeah. I do think there's a differentiation between core IT and value-oriented data and AI, and we have created that separation in terms of how we think of the different pillars within technology as a vertical. So when you think of core systems of record, when you think of ERPs and CRMs and the work that's involved in maintaining them, in improving those, and all of the efforts that are behind them, that requires a mindset of the core IT landscape that is historically been something that is strengthened over time through resilience, through the ability to drive systems which can scale, and obviously through the governing mechanisms as well. And those are really many of those are really lights on activities that organizations have within them. But when you take the other side of the spectrum, which is the data and AI side, you really think of these as profitability drivers and growth drivers. So this is where these teams and the capabilities that these teams are driving really has to be thought through in a value first mindset. So I do think that differentiation is something that has come to life. Different organizations have different operating models on how they have monetized that and how they brought that to life, but each of them has very different investment theses. They have very different capabilities that you require, talent as well, and they have very different outcomes that they're looking to drive. So there is that separation, I think, which is going to happen, if not yet in all organizations of scale and size. That is going to be the ability to really drive both from different steering angles.
Nice. Now, when you think about where we've been, and I think I'm thinking back to our last interview. If we think forward in terms of our 2027 edition, Arun, where do you think all of this is headed, and what does the broader transformation arc for enterprise look like to you in terms of what companies will be extracting from the technology moving forward?
I've made a bit of a habit of making some predictions, Allison, at the
Mhm.
AI Infra Summit each year, and for some reason or the other, these predictions have come true. Not that I'm advocating for anybody to put
Mhm.
bets on that in the prediction markets, but just going back to last year's conversation, we were talking about open models, and of course, no surprise, this week the attention is all on Kimi and all the developments that have taken place from some of the open weight models. I do
Mhm.
think I really like some of the frontier models releases that are starting to come together now. I saw the announcement from Gemini yesterday on 3.6, and it's no surprise that they focused on verbosity and performance sustainability as one of the areas of focus. So
Yeah.
while certain frontier models are really pushing the boundaries of what benchmarks can drive, others are really taking the approach of we want to drive sustainable consumption. So we want to drive the ability to provide outcomes, but not as verbose as previous generation models, more token efficient in both input and output, compression oriented technologies on how those come together. So I do think in this era of token maxing, um, organizations, if they have not yet, will all be forced to take some actions, some measures, some guardrails that you've had to build. Those are going to become extremely important. So I do think this usage-based economy that we're all coalescing into as an industry is something that's going to stay relevant, and that is going to bring to question: do you want to use the flagship model for all of your tasks or only the most sophisticated tasks? And would you route some of your other efforts into perhaps previous generation models, perhaps models that do not do as much of the tool calling and the skills, but can do a fair amount of quantitative efforts? So it is really going to become a multi model approach for how we think through the enablement of AI through the lenses of sustainability from a token and usage perspective.
I think we're gonna have to call you the Notre Dame of AI pretty soon, Arun. We'll catch it up with you next year to see if you're correct. Obviously, this is an AI Infra preview episode, and so I have to ask, other than your own sessions at the event, what are you looking forward to in terms of content and then connection?
I've had a great opportunity to sit in on some great talks at the AI Infra Summit. It's always a wonderful opportunity to listen to some of the thought leaders coming from the infrastructure providers, the model labs, the rest of the ecosystem as well. So I am looking forward to some of the architectural discussions that are going to take place in terms of how we're furthering the current generation of architecture. I am looking forward to hearing about inferencing at scale, which was obviously a hot topic last year, but obviously with the evolution of everything that's taken place since then, there have been a few changes in the variables that the industry has thought through. So that is an important discussion that I'm very excited about as well. So lots to look forward to, but those are just a couple top of mind.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to see your sessions once again. And it's been a pleasure to have you on the show again. I love this interview every year. Where can folks connect with you if they want to continue the conversation?
Great. As always, it's a pleasure to connect with you as well, Allyson. So folks can find me on LinkedIn. I have a Substack that I've started authoring a few articles around the industry and how this is elevating the use of AI in both your everyday as well as the work that we do. So that is where I would direct folks to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, thank you.